Newman had reversed his car into the car park and was sitting on the bonnet. I called out to him. He acknowledged it was him and he started walking towards us. The alarming thing for me was he had his right arm in his right jacket pocket and his left arm was down by his side. As I'm walking towards him, I'm thinking, how do I see what's in that pocket? I said to him, okay, I'm going to give you a search now to make sure you've got nothing on you. Newman asked why, and I repeated, as we're going to search you. Newman turned around with his back to me to make it look like he was complying. As I'm just about to step in to do the search, he had a pocket knife with a blade of probably about 6 centimetres on it. He spun around and has impacted me in the left forearm. Newman pulls the knife back, goes for me again, hits my wrist. As I'm trying to move backwards, I fall over. Training kicked in where I thought I'm going to have to cover my firearm to make sure he doesn't get it. Hang on, he's not trying to get my firearm, he's actually trying to kill me. That's when he steps over me and walks straight over to Matt.
He had this demonic look on his face, and then Newman started to attack me while we're struggling, so I just couldn't get my firearm out. And then the next thing I heard was a gunshot. Then Newman just fell dead beside me.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Today, we're going to talk to two former policemen who were victims of a terrorist attack that nearly claimed their lives and resulted in the terrorists being shot and killed. These two officers have not spoken publicly in detail about this incident before, but today they've agreed to come into the studio and share their story. The attack occurred 10 years ago. Both officers were working as counter-terrorist detectives when they were attacked and stabbed by 18-year-old Newman Haider, who they were speaking with about concerns he was being radicalised by the Islamic State. As you could imagine, an incident like that has a profound impact on those involved. What people sometimes don't realise is behind the tough exterior, police are just human. They feel pain and have emotions like everyone else. Taking someone's life, even someone who is trying to kill you, comes at a cost. Today, we're in a Melbourne studio talking to an Australian Federal Police officer, who we'll call Matt, and a former Victorian police officer called Niall. We're going to find out who they are, talk about the incident in detail, how it changed their lives, and a lot of other things about policing and terrorism. Now up front, I'd just like to thank Niall and also Matt for coming on I Catch Killers and sharing their story, because it can't be easy talking about what they went through. Welcome to I Catch Killers. I've got two guests in the studio today, so firstly, let me welcome Matt.
Hey Gary, thanks for having us in.
Matt, you're a Australian Federal Police officer?
Yes.
And we've also got, we can't forget Niall here. Niall, you're a former Victorian police officer.
Yeah, that's right, Gary.
Well, just like to thank both of you for coming into the studio. In the introduction, I talked about an incident that brought you guys very close together. It was a terrorist attack in which you were both injured, and also resulted in the person who injured you being shot and killed. Pretty heavy topic, and we're going to discuss that in detail. But how come, and I just want to put this out because the public listening, well, why have we got an AFP dude here and a Victorian cop? Why were you working together? How did that come about?
So the Joint Counterterrorism team comprises the local police force, so in this case Victoria Police, the Australian Federal Police, and then also the security agencies. And the Joint Counterterrorism team operates in all our states and territories across Australia. So this was Victoria Police detectives combined with federal agents and the intelligence services. So That's how we came to be working together in 2014.
I started at the JCTT on the 1st of September in 2014. And I'd been there a day or two, and Niall came up to me, and as we know, Victorians are very parochial around the AFL. And he asked me what my footy team was. And I looked at him and said, Parramatta. And he looked at me in disgust and walked off. And
I think that's pretty fair.
And saying that, the Eels haven't been going overly flash over
There's
the last few
nothing
years.
to be bragging about.
And, but stand by them. But he, so that was our introduction.
Yeah.
And then I think, I was there a couple more weeks, and then we got thrust to working together.
It's funny, and it's not unique to policing, but I think it's something that we all understand, how you look when you're tasked with a new investigation or a new team or a new role. You look closely at the person you're going to be working with, because you're going to get to know that person very well. You're going to spend a lot of time, and you're either going to like them or hate them or something in between.
Yep.
First impressions?
Well, with this one, it was completely different, Gary, because myself and Matt were on different teams.
Yeah.
So that night, it was a combination of different members from different teams, all of who I was aware of, but we hadn't worked closely together before. So not knowing Matt's capabilities or the other AFP members that were present that night, that sort of made it a little bit more difficult to operate. Because as you say...
You brought in another aspect there, because there's an assumption that we all come with this knowledge and skill set working with police, but until you see it, really, the pressure on, you don't know if they're going to come to the fore. Yeah,
you're right. Probably one of the real benefits, I didn't know Matt's background, but because he was a Victoria Police member prior to joining the AFP, there was a specific element of our training that Matt remembered and actually said while we were out there on the night that I'd say saved our lives, and that is due to the interoperability of our skills and both of our trainings.
Okay. Let's talk about the incident, and we'll talk briefly because I want to find out a little bit more about you guys before we go into full detail. But it was on the 23rd of September 2014 outside Endeavour Hills Police Station in Melbourne. You were both stabbed, and the offender was shot and killed. Matt, firstly, you were stabbed in the eye, you were stabbed in the chest, and my understanding of it is the stab wound in the chest was a centimetre from your heart. They're potentially life-threatening. Talk me through what happened at the time.
Yes, so during the attack, and I don't know what order it happened in, and you sort of, your body shuts down and does weird things during a critical incident, and I went, as soon as I saw the knife, I had auditory exclusion, so I lost all my hearing. And then he sort of attacked me, and I'm sort of fighting with him, trying to get my gun out. I couldn't. I lost fine motor skills, so I was struggling with my holster and everything else. So when I say I don't remember the order of the attacks or of the stabbing, I can only sort of assume. But I had a couple sort of over my left, one down over my left eye and down the left side of my face, and then 2 in my left shoulder.
Yeah.
And that severed a few tendons and muscles in there. And then the one in my chest, that went into my liver. And that was the life-threatening one where I had to have a few units of blood put in the hospital and all that sort of stuff. But they showed me the photos after the surgery, and you could see the hole in the liver, and then just to the right, I guess, of the photo. Was my heart, so it wasn't too far off.
No, well, we'll talk in detail about it, but it was, you were lucky in a way in that 1 centimetre, and we've all been in the police and you've seen it. Sometimes it's just one stab wound that can take someone's life. Yep. Now, you were there, Niall, obviously, and you were stabbed as well.
Yeah, that's right. So I was stabbed first as I've gone to search Newman.
Yep.
The first stab wound entered my left forearm, which severed through the ulnar nerve. Now, the ulnar nerve controls your motor skills in the hand and the muscles. So it essentially rendered my left hand inoperable. So I couldn't use any of the fingers.
Yeah.
And then the second knife wound was a defensive one, where I was trying to throw my arm onto the blade, which slashed me across the wrist with superficial cuts.
Okay, and again, a traumatic incident in the best of things, but another layer that you fired the fatal shot.
Yeah, that's right.
And I've been involved in numerous police shootings and investigations into police shootings, and I've never seen anyone come away from it that hasn't been impacted on it, taking someone's life.
Yeah, you're right, Gary. And look, I always acknowledge action normally beats reaction. So
Yeah.
myself and Matt were very lucky to escape that incident with our lives. That's how I firmly believe that. But the impact, yeah, there's the personal, there's the professional and the family impacts. For example, I had surgery with my left hand to reattach the nerves and get the strength back. And my daughter was very young at the time of the shooting. She was about 22 months old, and I remember being on sick leave and trying to put a scrunchie in her hair. And because I'd lost all the fine motor skills, I just couldn't do that. And for me, that's the family impact that really concerns me. Is in my wife and daughter didn't sign up for policing. It was me. And I accept the risks of when we go to work every day and that wearing firearms, there is a reality we might use them. Whereas the family have no control over this whatsoever. So to see my family impacted due to things I couldn't do at home anymore, that really causes me emotional turmoil.
Yeah, it's a heavy situation that you both found yourself in. We'll unpack that, but before we do, I want to find out a little bit about you guys. Who are you as a young fella, Matt?
I grew up I was born overseas in Papua New Guinea,
Right.
and then moved back and spent a bit of time in North Queensland, and then moved down to the mid-north coast of New South Wales.
What was with all the moving around in Papua New Guinea? Was it your parents' work or?
Oh no, just Mum went over there to have me. She moved over there with her sister and brother-in-law, and
Yeah.
they had a few kids over there in Lae. So she went up there and spent a bit of time there, and I was born, and then came back and she met my dad, or who like I call my dad. Probably 12 months or so after she moved back to Australia.
Yep.
And then spent a bit of time, went back to New Guinea, spent a bit, then back to North Queensland, and then down to the mid-north coast of New South Wales.
And what did you always have aspirations to become a cop, or?
Not really. It was more wanted to join the military.
Yeah.
So out of school, I joined the RAF as a
Right.
photographer, and had a few years there, and then got out. Did a bit of photography around Melbourne, and then thought, I need a full-time job. And VicPol were recruiting pretty heavily, and saying that, like, I had thought about joining the police sort of towards the end of school, but it was more just thoughts and talks and nothing really sort of all that serious. And then I thought, I got good leave and good super. And in 96, I joined up to Victoria Police.
Okay. How long did you stay in Victoria Police before you went across to AFP?
It's about 17 years, I think. I think
Okay.
96 to 2013.
All right. What about you? Who are you as a young guy?
So I grew up in country northeast Victoria, so up in Ned Kelly country. Came down to, wanted to be a policeman from about 4 years of age. I used to have a little police station at home. When Mum and Dad would get home, I'd go out and put a ticket on their car and rake in some fines that way.
I'm surprised you haven't ended up in highway patrol.
Yeah, oh God. Yes.
Nothing wrong with highway patrol.
No, correct. We love our highway patrol members.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I came down to Melbourne in 1996, got into hospitality, because at that stage, Matt got in when it was a boom recruiting, and then it dried up until early 2000s. So I then joined in 2000, 2 days after my 24th birthday in January 2000. So
Right.
23 odd years in policing.
Okay, you've had a couple of interests in. You worked on the Piranha Task Force.
Yeah.
And just explain that to people that mightn't know it. We're down in Melbourne, so I'm sure everyone's heard about it. We've heard about it in New South Wales.
Yeah, no doubt. So the Piranha Task Force was investigating organised crime and also the gangland murders,
Yep.
which were prevalent from 2000 onwards down here, with something like 28 deaths or murders, should I say, at that stage. So I came to Piranha Task Force in January 2010, promoted to the rank of detective. And we were allocated an investigation on a Middle Eastern organised crime character that had significant influence in Melbourne, Sydney, and elsewhere. Usual ill-gotten gains and wealth. So the Piranha Task Force, that was a dedicated crew that was then looking at the Phase 3 mop-up of people who have survived the gangland wars.
As we all knew about as the underbelly.
Yeah,
gangland
exactly
wars.
right. And that's really where I was working with some great detectives, Mick Hughes, Detective Inspector, Dave Jones, Steve Cooper, some really good investigators there, which gave me my craft within the detective world of investigations.
There would have been a lot of pressure on there because it was so high profile, and we were talking before we started the podcast about the impact it has on family, and that you could be home but not actually present. And I would imagine a job like that, getting a sense of the pace that investigation was going at and the nature of the work, that would have been one of those times where your focus was very much on your work.
Yeah, absolutely, Gary. And as you know, with investigations, it's not just focused on a sole area. There's so many different branches off that it goes that you've got to allocate resources and time to that. Whereas it's not just an 8 till 4 Monday to Friday job. You're playing catch up football by trying to find out what's been occurring on the phones, listening devices, and other methodology that's in play to try and predict the next move of what that organised crime figure would do. But then when you're getting home, you're present at home, but quite literally, you're still thinking about work and what's got to be done the next day, the weeks after, and onwards. I was very lucky that we always had very strong detective sergeants and inspectors and superintendents running our investigations that would really keep us focused on what the main goal was.
Yeah.
So when it would try and branch off into different areas, it would be brought back into.
That's interesting. I've seen it on investigations. You can start chasing rabbits down holes because it's you uncover so much and your head's in overdrive. But a good leader or officer in charge of an investigation does keep it the focus. This is your role. This is the focus of what we've terms of reference, and let's stay on track.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We had the AFP detective superintendent Des Appleby worked really well with our Vic Pole detective inspector Mick Hughes. They were sidestepping everything that would occur, hand in glove responses. It was a really proactive, targeted investigation that we were doing on it, and it actually got the relationship with Victoria Police and the AFP in Melbourne back on track again for the work that we did, because previously we'd had the tomato tins investigation of the ecstasy tablets where Victoria Police had been removed from the building by the AFP. So several years later, the relationship was back on track to target organised crime.
There's been that over the years, that bit of pushback from state police and AFP, but hopefully that's across the board. That's getting better.
Yeah,
and I think with AFP and Matt, you can talk to this because you've worked in both. AFP are getting this. They haven't been, in terms of policing, around for that long a time, but they're starting to get the experience, and you're getting people who've had their whole career, at the sharp end of policing.
Yeah, and I think they had their sort of issues early on, and I remember in Vic Pole, I was walking down to do our early on, just after I got out of the academy, actually, and I was posted into Melbourne. We were walking down Latrobe Street, and we were walking because we were going to use the range at the AFP offices, and one of the detectives from the Melbourne CIB said to me, we're going to the AFP, and they're useless and hopeless and don't do too much. But sort of fast forward 15 sort of 20 years, and I think with that experience and over time, plus working pretty closely with other police forces around Australia, and that experience in the AFP. And there's a few things that they do really, really well, and that's what they're sort of trying to focus on. Like the big drug imports, terrorism, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, plus they're also actively sort of trying to recruit police from other police forces, which sort of, you're sort of buying experience, and you're sort of bringing someone in.
You're bringing in that experience. Well, you said 17 years in VicPol, and then you went across to the AFP. What was the decision that swung you to go across?
Yeah, I was doing actually, I was working in Intel at the time, and I was doing a secondment with the AFP out at the airport.
Yep.
In a joint. In the joint intel group out there, and we had some Victoria Police detectives that were out there in the investigations team. So it was this joint team, and it was really well resourced, and we're looking at basically trusted insiders around the airports, and just sort of seeing the opportunities that the AFP offered was like, this is, there's something bigger than VicPol, because VicPol, while I had a fantastic time there, and worked in all different places, but sort of state based.
I know what you're saying, and I would often, when I was in New South Wales Police, look at the AFP and think, oh, well, you could get stationed overseas or different investigations, and a bit broader. So it's I can see the temptation there. You've come together. Let's start talking in the build up to the incident. What drew you both to counterterrorism?
So I was in the security intelligence group at VicPol for a couple of years in Intel there, and I'd started studying my masters in Intel, but just before I sort of, around about that time of going to SIG, I sort of started seeing, the national security side of things. Sort of got interested in terrorism, and then I switched over and started doing my masters in terrorism and security. Started working at Security Intelligence Group, and which dealt with issue motivated groups and terrorism. And so this is when they started working in with at the early days of the JCTT. And
just so our listeners, JCCT, just explain.
Oh yeah, the Joint Counterterrorism Team, what Niall and I were part of, and and I guess it just kicked off from there, and like sort of studying it, and then sort of working in the area, and sort of getting that interest, I guess, was the main motivation. It took me a few years to get over there, but yeah.
I think it's a fascinating area of policing, and my thing was homicide. But if I had a choice of where I'd go outside of homicide, and a regret that I didn't do counterterrorism, because I think it gives you a worldview of things. Yep. You got to look at things deeply, and you got to be more proactive. And from a criminal investigation point of view, at homicide, we sort of kick in when the shit's happened and come and investigate the crime. But with counterterrorism, it's about predicting the crime and preventing the crime more. Niall, your interest in counterterrorism, how did that come about?
Yeah, so there was some self-interest in there at that stage. There was some reshuffling at Piranha Task Force of our crews, and we were then given the offer of what other task force would you like to go to, or which crime type. Now, because the Organised Crime Task Force was operating in the Federal Police building, I had my security clearances, computer access, understood who the different detectives and federal agents were there. Victoria Police traditionally had one crew of detectives in counterterrorism, and they were due to be rotated out. So there was an opportunity to stay within the AFP building, working in counterterrorism. At that stage, I thought to myself, from a resume perspective, the self-interest of this is a crime type really unique to Commonwealth legislation, the opportunities that come with it, as Matt spoke about with the AFP, the travel, the experiences, is far beyond what Victoria Police could provide. So working jointly with the Commonwealth and bringing the machinery together was something that really interested me. So in 2012, that's when I transferred over to the Joint Counterterrorism team.
All right. Well, it's interesting. That's what drew you to counterterrorism, and I would suggest at that stage you didn't think you'd be victims of a terrorist act. You thought your role would be preventing those acts and keeping the public safe. But as it turned out that you guys became a victim of a terrorist attack. 19th or 20th of September 2014, al-Baghdadi issued a fatwa, and what I understand, and you guys might be able to add to this, it's like an edict or a ruling by a recognised religious authority on a point of Islamic law. So, fatwa, if I'm pronouncing it properly.
Yep.
This fatwa related to calling for attacks in 5 Western countries, including Australia, Canada, France, USA, and United Kingdom, specifically targeting police and military intelligence. So, when that was issued, and let's hold on to the date, the 20th of September 2014, the incident that you guys were victims of was 23, so 3 days later. You would have heard about that in counterterrorism or be aware of it. And did, at any point in time, you think that would impact on you so deeply and personally?
No. I remember rocking into work on that Monday, was that the 22nd, and our analysts had got the fatwa.
Yep.
So they downloaded it and gone through and highlighted it and emailed it out to us all. And I remember reading it, it was, saying, attack the disbelievers in their own countries and, especially, the US, Canada, the filthy French, and Australia. And sort of reading it and going, oh yeah, this is just the usual rhetoric and, that ISIS carries on with, and, just more proof to what we're about, as in the JCTT. We've got to look at this a little bit more closely. Yeah. And so and you sort of think, whatever, pretty much. And then I guess when you start sort of in hindsight, you're looking back and there's all these indicators around what did happen at that stage, throughout the Western countries and and the Middle East, and that fatwa was a pretty important call to arms for ISIS, and it was, I guess it was the start of bigger things to come.
Well, when they're identifying the potential targets as police and or military, we stand out. Like it's not hard. And I remember when that came through, there was a point in time when it was just reiterated to us that you've got to be careful out there. And again, your take on it, you became aware of it in the same sort of circumstances.
Yeah, that's right. As Matt said, the intelligence analysts had done some work around it, and at that stage, I don't think any of the Western intelligence agencies had any strategic knowledge of where this document would end up.
Yeah.
And essentially the world was watching, and certainly our incident then hallmarked what occurred from that date on, September onwards, 2014, with many terror attacks inspired by ISIS in those different countries that were nominated, specifically against police and military mainly, that were targeted. So Curtis Cheng in New South Wales.
That was at
in 2015, absolutely.
Headquarters.
Yeah. The police in New York, Ken Healy on foot patrol a month after our incident, when a Muslim convert took to him with a hatchet to the back of the head and the police fatally shot the offender there. We saw attacks in France for the police in their police station, and it continued on. So when we, myself and Matt, both had a trip to New York, and we met with the director of counterterrorism over there, And he spoke about, whenever New York speaks about terror attacks, they always speak about Endeavour Hills, Melbourne, Australia as the first
highlighting
one.
that. Yeah, okay. So that's, well, when we're looking at it, when it was issued, it was 3 days before you guys were attacked. So you went out. How were you tasked that day? What happened? You got together and that was a tasking. You had to go to speak to Newman.
Yeah, we were originally there were we were originally tasked on the Monday.
Yep.
To go and speak to him, and Victoria Police, their security and organised crime intel unit, were going to go and speak to one of Hayter's mates.
Yep.
And it was sort of a bit of toing and froing on that Monday, and it was decided we didn't have enough people, so it was put off until the Tuesday.
So can you explain, going to speak to him, the purpose of what you were trying to achieve?
So for us, I looked at 3 objectives here. To start off, there was no arrest power for what we knew about what his behaviours had been. So the first one was around disruption. So I look at it, if we're talking about the crime type of drugs, if we were to knock on a drug dealer's house and alert them that the police are watching you, you would see them stop drug dealing straight away.
Yeah.
They'd move out their hydro crops or their pill press, whatever it is, and start up in another location in a few weeks' time. So disruption for us, initially I'm thinking, okay, if we're in front of him, he'll see that there's some interest in his behaviour and he would de-escalate that, because what he'd been doing was Google searches on Prime Minister Tony Abbott at the time, had been looking at how to make explosives, for example, and also the daily agenda of Tony Abbott, where he'd be when he was next coming to Melbourne. So there was behaviours we were aware of, as well as him waving the Shahada flag at the Dandenong Shopping Centre on the Friday before our incident.
And just to explain those that don't know what that flag is.
Yeah, so the Shahada is an Islamic display of faith, essentially meaning there's one God and only one God, which is black and white in colour, and was similar to the one I think displayed at the Lint Cafe siege out the windows by Man Monis. So Newman had been waving that flag at the Dandenong Shopping Centre, which is a very multicultural suburb where you've got Sunnis and Shia Muslims, and again, there's some social disharmonies between both of those religious groups. So for him to be waving the Shahada flag caused significant alarm. Now, luckily for us, we had 25 Victoria Police recruits doing a foot patrol at that shopping centre, doing a training operation, getting confidence speaking to the public and being seen in public with their accoutrements on. They spoke to Newman on the day, where he cooperated with them, gave them his identification, but also told them that he wasn't here to cause harm to the shoppers or the shopping centre, but at some stage our government would pay for what it's done. Now,
okay, and this is coming from an 18-year-old kid that's, not intimidated by police. That changes
that's right.
Dynamics a little bit.
Absolutely, yep. Correct. So that was part of the reason why we were speaking to him about the flag waving. So the second objective was intelligence gathering, and the third one was human source acquisition, potentially.
Okay. So did you consider it a high risk, like a risk assessment? It's something that you did informally, going out to speak to him, and how many police went out to speak to him?
So like I said, that Monday it was decided we wouldn't go out, and then on the Tuesday we came into work and they said, okay, and they brought 4 in then. So it was me and the other guy who were going to go out on the Monday, plus Niall and one other. So we had sort of 4 people. And at this sort of stage, we knew that...
Okay, so at that point, you anticipated it was a potential risk. You're taking a risk in the lower sense, but you're taking 4 police out there. Yeah. Okay.
And, it was sort of around this time that, because he was an ASIO person of interest.
Yeah.
So they'd sort of pass that down into the JCTT that they're obviously a part of, and they wanted us to go and speak to him because there was some intel around him wanting to purchase some knives.
Okay.
And because they're not armed and police are, then that was sort of their thinking. And importantly, that the previous week when he was waving that flag around, there was some counterterrorism raids in Brisbane and Sydney, and I think there were 15 arrests, and that was why he was waving the flag around,
showing support for the people that have been arrested.
Yeah, as well as that. Well, at the time we didn't know, but that it was all that travel to the Middle East, for Westerners travel to the Middle East, fight, and that. So it was all, and his passport had been cancelled, and all this sort of stuff by ASIO had sort of done this, but on that, and funnily enough, we'll go back to that Thursday when he was waving the flag. He went home and made a phone call that night, and there was someone in the room with him. We don't know who that was, but he was making a phone call, and ASIO, because he was a person of interest of ASIO, they had his phone tapped, I guess, for want of a better term. And as it sort of started ringing, he was talking to the person in the room with him and said, referring to the police officers at the Dandenong Plaza that day, if I had had a knife, I would have stabbed them. And that shows where he was at in his own head. But the ASIO interception team didn't listen to that phone call because it was not answered. That went off and just sat in the ether, and that wasn't discovered until months into the coronial investigation. So there was a lot of intel that wasn't passed on, or that was missed sort of in the lead up and on the day of us going out there, saying that we did know that Hayder was with some of his mates out at Warburton doing some bushwalking and collecting spring water and this sort of thing, because we were getting reports from ASIO surveillance that they were out there. So that's why we decided to go and speak to his mum and dad and just sort of get a bit of an insight and a feel into what they were like, as well as what Newman was sort of going through and their thoughts. So that's when the four of us went out to the family home. The two other guys stayed in the car, and Niall and I went and had a chat with the parents, and his two brothers were there at the same time as well.
And what sort of feel did you come away from the house after speaking to the parents?
So initially, Gary, my role was to be on the cover team purely for this deployment. So the day before, on Monday, 22nd of September, I'd been promoted to the rank of sergeant at Narre Police Station. So about 15 minutes away from Endeavour Hills would have been the uniform station where I was going to be starting at. I'd been in counterterrorism at this stage for coming up to 3 years, had completed all my counterterrorism training, had a reasonably good feel for investigations. I was a Tier 4 interview advisor, so being comfortable with people and knowing their body language generally and how they would react to us gives us that insight that you're speaking of. So at the last minute, the decision was made by the AFP acting team leader out there to put me and Matt together to speak to the Hayder family. We arrived about 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the Hayder family, greeted by the mother and father in a modest house. From memory, it was they were very nice, respectful people to us. There was no sign of any animosity or hatred towards the West from them. And they are absolutely the people, and their sons, that were contributing to the social cohesion that the Australia and Victoria was enjoying at that stage. So we spoke to them at lengths about Newman's behaviours, what he'd been up to, the sort of the life movements of what he's been up to. And they were speaking reasonably positively about some futures with enrolling in TAFE to do a course. He had a part-time job. So for me, there wasn't the worrying factors that this is coming up to a fatal intersection with him, because of the way that they were letting us know that they were monitoring him. They told him to stay away from extremists. And they had a picture of him, which we knew behind the scenes. He wasn't telling mum and dad the complete truth as to his associations with those people.
Putting myself in that position, if I went and spoke to a family and you're looking at getting the background or the feel of an 18-year-old kid, and then you meet the family like that, it'd give you some sort of comfort that, okay, well, it's maybe it's just a kid being a kid, and his radicalisation hasn't run that deep.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly...
And it's hard to, because the offence hasn't happened, and you've got to sort of anticipate what's going to happen.
Yep. As you know, within policing, there's the guilty act, guilty mind that's got to be complete there. Now, from a risk assessment point of view, on the Monday, the 22nd of September, Newman had some involvement with Victoria Police from July, so 3 months earlier, well, 2 months earlier, where he'd actually been present at the Fountain Gate Shopping Centre in Endeavour Hills, Fountain Gate, at midnight, where a shotgun had been produced by a third party, where Newman actually took the firearm off that person and voluntarily gave it to Victoria Police investigators in July, and made a statement to support the prosecution about the person that had access to that firearm. So certainly when I got access to that statement and read it, that provided me some comfort, thinking, well, in July, he could have turned that firearm on the investigating police members, but chose to give it to them and make a statement.
And we're only talking 3-4 months before.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what you went to the family home. You're then due to meet him at the police station. Had arrangements been made for him to come to the police station, or?
No, not at that stage. We'd sort of spent about an hour, I guess, talking to his mum and dad and his two brothers, and they were allaying some of their concerns, but also just looking around the house, and it was and they were really nice. You could just tell that they were a caring family, and because we'd heard about the wanting to purchase knives, and he was waving that Shahada flag around the previous week at Dandenong Shopping Centre, we asked to look in his room, and we went up, had a search of his room, it was a cursory search, but just to make sure that there was nothing there, and there wasn't. It was pretty sparse. I think he was living between that house and his mate's place, so they were sort of he was going in between. So we had a look there, and then we asked his mum and dad for his phone number, and they gave it to us. And his mum, I think her comment was, he never answers his phone. You can try, but he won't answer. And we thought, oh, okay. So then we left, knowing that he was still out east with his mates, and we went back to Endeavour Hills Police Station, and we were sort of sitting around, and Niall said, well, we've got his number, we may as well give it a go. Try. And lo and behold, he answered after about the second ring, so from an unknown number. And there was a bit of discussion between him and Niall to where we were going to meet. They initially wanted to meet us at Hungry Jack's in Hallam, and as we know, it's probably not a good place to talk about issues of terrorism around families and all that sort of stuff, plus our security and all that. So there was a lot of toing and froing about coming into the police station, and eventually he agreed to come in, and I think it was about 7:15 when that phone call was made, and he said, I'll be in there in about half an hour. So we were sitting in the mess room at the police station, the four of us, and we just decided, we just sort of discussed what we would, how we'd go about it. And because Niall and I had spoken to his parents and his brothers, it was a pretty obvious decision that we would be the ones that would go and speak to him, and the other two would just sort of hang back, and it'd just be about.
So he arrived at the police station, or you saw him out the front of the police station?
So the phone call to Newman, as Matt said, was about 7:15. There'd been a decision within the four police members there that myself and Matt would continue on with speaking to Newman in regard to it, because we'd had the information. Now, considering my role was purely cover team, I didn't have an interview plan done up. So, as Matt spoke about, we quickly workshopped what appropriate questions without knowing him. There was a bigger counterterrorism investigation going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, in my diary, I wrote down some basic topics to discuss with him. I spoke to Matt and the other AFP members about the need to search him upon his arrival, because some of the information we'd known was that a month earlier he'd been seen playing with a knife. So when we look at our control of weapons legislation, you've got to suspect on reasonable grounds that they've got access to a knife. I'm thinking about the legalities of information from 1 month earlier with no current intelligence around that. Do we? So as part of the planning, it was we're going to search him when he arrives, because Newman had stated to me on the phone he didn't want to come inside the police station, which for me and our three objectives, that was fine. We could meet with him anywhere, as Matt said, as long as it's safe and secure, and we had our numbers there without impacting public safety. So Newman said he'd be there in 15 minutes. In reality, it took him 5 minutes to get there, because what was unknown to us at the time, he was running every single red light to get to meet with us. Now, that is
That's pretty telling and with the benefit of hindsight, isn't it? That he's
absolutely
whipped
correct.
himself up into a frenzy.
Yeah, that's right. And the myself and Matt don't have the ability to. We've not heard him speak before on a telephone, so I don't know when I'm speaking to him about whether he's being guarded, whether he's being honest and open with us, apart from my own sort of intuition as to what I think this phone call is. In the background, I heard someone saying, "Get them to come to us," type stuff. And that's why we decided, no, they come to the police station, or he comes to the police station.
That was a good call.
Yeah, in hindsight, absolutely. But standard policies, essentially.
So, okay, so you've decided that you'll speak to him. Did he ring you, or you just waited out the front of the police station for him?
So he then phoned us up within that 5 minute period to say, I'm out the front of the police station. So I asked what car he'd be in, which he described it. And then myself, Matt, and the other AFP members spoke about essentially the order of march. So myself and Matt would go out to speak to him. There's no way I'm taking 4 police members out to speak to an 18-year-old who's voluntarily coming to a police station.
It's the wrong look.
Absolutely, it is. So the decision was leave the 2 federal police members inside the police station. So if we can bring him back in, great, we've got coverage. But if not, we knew there was surveillance outside covering us as well.
Yeah.
So myself and Matt walk out. We both had our day books with us, casually dressed. Now, it was about 7:30 in the evening. The weather had been a beautiful day, but then in the evening it turned reasonably chilly. So if I knew we'd be out that late, I would have had a jacket. Now, the first thing I noticed was Newman had reversed his car into the car park and was sitting on the bonnet. So for me, that was a little bit unusual as to why he'd reverse his car in, considering no other car spots were taken and he had free run essentially of that car park. So I called out to him, called out his name, and he acknowledged it was him, and he started walking towards us. And again, understanding or looking for risk factors, I'm looking at his behaviour. There's nothing in his eyes, there's nothing in the way he's walking towards us that indicates some sort of attack's imminent. But the alarming thing for me was he had his right arm in his right jacket pocket and his left arm was down by his side. Now, for me, if I've got a jacket on, it's either both hands in my pocket or both hands out. So the one hand in the pocket was reasonably alarming for me, considering the intelligence that was known. So as I'm walking towards him, I'm thinking, how do I see what's in that pocket without disrupting the intelligence gathering, the human source acquisition and disruption? If I was to stop and pull a firearm on him and ask him to open his jacket, if he didn't have a knife on him, that would have been a national incident, and I would have been looking for a new job, I suspect, the next day. So I thought, if I extend my hand from a distance, he'll see that it's an act of chivalry, we'll shake hands, and that will be a good judgment point to see whether he's going to respond to that. So I took my hand out, he took his right hand out, we met, shook hands, and I introduced him to Matt. We walked back to his vehicle, where I then placed my daybook on top of his car roof, and then said to him, "Okay, I'm going to give you a search now to make sure you've got nothing on you." From that point, Newman asked why, and I repeated, "Because we're going to search you." So with that, Newman turned around with his back to me to make it look like he was complying with a pat-down search. So Newman put both hands on the car bonnet, and that's when I stepped in with my left and right hand up to start the pat-down search from the shoulders back down. At that stage, Matt was at the about 2 meters or 1.5 meters away from me, looking in the back window of the car to make sure there was no one else in there and what other intelligence might be seen. So as I'm just about to step in to do the search, Newman, unbeknown to me, in that right jacket pocket I was speaking about, he had a pocket knife with a blade of probably about 6 centimeters on it. So with that knife, he spun around and has impacted me in the left forearm, slicing through the ulnar nerve. And at that stage, the brain and the body are working at two different speeds here. I'm in detective mode, thinking about the questions, thinking about the methodology behind what we're going to do. So then to see the glint of a knife butt in my forearm, it's the old, hang on, what's going on here? And then
process.
Absolutely. So then Newman pulls the knife back, goes for me again, which this is really close range we're at here. So I throw the left arm on it and hits my wrist as I'm trying to move backwards to gain some distance away from him. And then with that, I actually fall over onto the ground because, again, the brain and the body working at two different speeds. So I fall over, and with my training from the early days of policing, if you're on the ground, if you're in a pub situation, you'd always try and cover your firearm. So that training kicked in where I thought, I'm going to have to cover my firearm to make sure he doesn't get it. Incorrectly assessing, well, hang on, he's not trying to get my firearm, he's actually trying to kill me. So as I'm rolled over onto my firearm, that's when he steps over me and walks straight over to Matt.
Yep.
So Matt, pick it up from there. Is that how it's just been described by Niall? Is that how you witnessed what went on, and what's your?
Yeah. So like I was sort of around that driver's side, looking in the car, because we knew he was with his mates that day, making sure there was no one in there to going to surprise us or see if there was anything in there. And I heard Niall say, I'm going to search you, and then Newman say why, and then I've sort of, as I'm sort of looking in there, I've looked up, and then Niall wasn't there, and I was sort of, hang on, I was a bit confused as to what was happening. But by this stage, Newman had moved around. He was probably standing about level with the front driver's side tyre, and he had that folding knife just at his waistband, and he had this, and I remember this pretty clearly. He had this demonic look on his face, and I'm sort of going, oh, hang on. What's going on? Yeah, what is, and while I say, I'm thinking this process, like this is happening, like, really, really quickly. And as soon as I saw that knife, like I said before, I had auditory exclusion. I just went deaf, totally couldn't hear anything. And apparently, I don't remember saying it, or I definitely didn't hear myself say it. I yelled knife, and as you do in your training, and then Newman started to attack me. So we were probably, I don't know, 1.5 meters, 2 meters away. And as we know in our training, we're taught, within 6 meters with a knife, you don't have that much time.
To get
so I'm sort of fighting with him with my left arm, trying to push him away while I'm, trying to get my.
You just had a plain clothes holster.
Yeah. So it had a. it had a small button sort of down halfway down the holster that you'd push in and then pull your firearm out. But lost fine motor skills, so I'm pushing the button or pushing the button in, or and while we're struggling, so I just couldn't get my firearm out, and then so Newman was attacking me, and I thought, I need to create some distance here. This is getting a little bit serious, but still in my mind, I didn't know at that stage that I'd been stabbed, but I sort of did. But so it was this confusing time. But I knew he had a knife, so I'm moving away. So I've sort of moved back and thinking I've got to create more distance. So I went to ground.
Had he stabbed you multiple times at that stage?
Yes.
You didn't
Yes,
realise it?
didn't, yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
you're stepping back. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. So, like I said, I don't know what order any of the stab wounds happened. But I moved back and thought I've got to go to ground, create some distance, so you can use the legs to keep them away and this sort of thing, or my feet. So I've gone to ground, thought I'd give myself some time to how to get the firearm out. But anyway, he has then sort of moved between me and the daycare centre that we were sort of parked outside, or we were speaking to him outside of. It was closed because it was 7:30, but so he's come down the left-hand side and around behind me as I'm on the ground, and I'm trying to get my my firearm out. And then I could sense him leaning over me, and I thought, this is going to be it. And I knew, sort of from CT and seeing ISIS videos and what their aims were, and this is his goal here is to kill me and then behead me. So that was going through my mind, trying to get my gun out, and everything's still deathly silent. And then the next thing I heard was a gunshot, and then Newman just fell dead beside me. And next thing was Niall said, "Mate, are you all right?" Because I'm not sure if he shot Newman or he shot me. Yeah. So I said, "Yep, I'm all good." And he said, "Go and get some ambulances." So I got up and sort of trotted into the police station, and this is when I realised that I had blood sort of streaming down my face, and my chest hurt. Anyway, got into the police station. There's a few people in the watch house, that had come in to report stuff or whatever. And they were a bit freaked out by copper running in, blood gushing out of their face, and said, "We need to get some ambulances." There's a lady in there. She got on the phone straight away, ordered some ambulances. I then went back outside just to make sure everything was all right with Niall, and then I went back in and got some first aid, and then the ambulances arrived and off to hospital.
You realise the extent of your injuries, and it's a pretty savage scar right beside your left eye there, and the chest injury.
Not at the time. I knew my chest hurt, and there was blood, a little bit of blood, but most of the blood was on the inside. Yeah. Because the knife went into the liver. Liver's just like a plastic bag full of blood. So, that was the serious issue. But I didn't know. I knew that I'd been stabbed there, and this one was probably a lot of blood in your face. So that was continually streaming, and there's a small sort of artery up here, so that was spurting a little bit of blood and stuff like that. My shoulder, and after I went back in, that's when I knew that something had happened to my shoulder, because that's when the pain started from that. So then the ambulances came and got put on the trolley, and then the green whistle and off into the Alfred Hospital.
Okay, well, getting back to you, Niall. You've been stabbed. You're on the deck. Then you're hearing what's going on there, or getting a sense of what's going on there, and Matt's on the ground. take us from what was going through your mind.
Yeah, Matt just saying it then brought back. I remember just before Newman stabbed me, I saw his eyes as well, and they were demonic, I think is the correct term. They were fiery, bright red, essentially. You could see the anger. You could see that there was significant harm he wanted to do with us. So when I heard Matt yell out knife, that for me provided absolute clarity in regard to what my actions needed to be from here. Without operational safety and tactics training or OST, knife means gun. There's no other way in policing that can be interpreted. So I was hearing Matt and Newman struggling as I roll off my firearm, knowing that Matt's being attacked here. I look over and I can see it. And Matt is now on the ground, and Newman is bent over him and stabbing him, I believe, around the shoulder area at that stage, and it is ferocious.
You're seeing this? This is
Yeah, that's right, absolutely. All while I'm drawing my firearm. So, to the credit of the training, I actually did run through in my mind about baton spray, no, not effective, close range, too far, or that. So yes, this is a firearm incident. I'm going to have to discharge it. I called out to Newman to instead of the police challenge, it was actually get off him. I yelled out. That obviously no impact. So from about 4.5 meters away, seeing that he's stabbing into Matt, all I have to shoot at is it was a really tough target. I'm not I'd say extremely proficient with a firearm. It had been 5 months and 3 weeks since I'd last done the firearms training, so a little bit rusty when you're nearly out of cycle. So I know all I've got to shoot at is either the legs or the head. I don't have a torso to shoot at because he's bent over Matt. Now, of course, with our training, it's the center of mass that we're trained to shoot at. The legs, they're close to Matt where Matt's lying down. If I shoot too low, there's a chance I could shoot or kill Matt. So the head at this stage is the biggest object for me to shoot at. It's a moving target. It's low light. It's 4.5 meters away. I've got blood coming out of my left arm. I managed to get the firearm out one-handed, steadied it with the my left arm, and then a reactive shot. I had the sights lined up with Newman's head, pulled the trigger, and impacted him in the head, killing him instantly. Now, for me, the relief when the body fell beside Matt, and as Matt said, I asked if he was okay, and he said yes. For me, that was, thank God, Matt's okay. Again, not realising how many injuries Matt had actually received. And at that stage, I asked Matt to go inside and get some assistance. At that stage, my detective training really kicked in. You'd remember when you did your detective training, there's a crime scene prac where you've got witnesses, offenders, the media, everyone turning up, and you're the detective in charge and directing it. Now, a week before I'd been involved in that shooting, I'm a regular blood donor every 3 months. The person who took my blood actually made the comment to me that that if I was to ever to lose blood quickly, I wouldn't go into shock as quick as others because my body's used to losing 400 or 500 mils of blood. So at that stage, then after the shooting, it was okay. He's clearly died as a result of the shooting. Now it's about the preservation of the crime scene because, as you know, within policing, transparency is the number one thing about what we do.
Yeah. Just on what you guys have told, and that happens so quick, and the thing that you're up against in policing, and I think you guys have articulated it very well in the way that you've explained the situation. You're coming up at a level of an awareness. You're cautious, but you've got someone that's come in with the malicious intent to go at you in a frenzied attack like he did. What you just described, it's like time slows down. All the things that you're trying to process, and then you've switched. And I think this. I want to unpack this a little bit. You'll switch straight into police mode, straight after an incident. as I said in the introduction, the police, you put on the uniform, carry the badge or whatever, you're still human. For God's sake, you guys have been stabbed and, someone's been trying to kill you, you've shot someone, and you're thinking about preserving the crime scene. I reckon we take a break at this stage. When we get back, we're going to talk about the aftermath of it, physically and emotionally, and just on your views on all things policing. But I also want to say, guys, thanks for sharing the story. I'm sitting here thinking, is this the right thing to make you guys relive it? But if one thing it does, it sends an important message out that, police get put up on pedestals, and sometimes deservedly, sometimes undeservedly. But there is a sharp end to policing, and you guys found it in a big way. So how about we take a break and come back for part 2?
Sure.
Sounds
Thanks,
good.
Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Cheers.